City, where good music keeps rolling 24 hours a day.
Thank you, Robin. It's a cold and dry morning on Merseyside. The temperature's 47 degrees. It's 8 o'clock. Michael Green with Radio City News. In America, President Ford is staging a dramatic comeback in the final stages of campaigning for the presidential election. With just 3 days to go until voting, the last opinion poll indicates he's now just 1% behind his rival Jimmy Carter. From Washington, a report by Peter Sharp.
Pollsters here are calling the Ford counterattack the biggest comeback in American political history. Just 6 months ago, confident and cocky Jimmy Carter was leading the president by more than 30 points. Today, just 72 hours before the voting booths open, a Lewis Harris poll, one of the most respected in the country, shows Carter with a wafer-thin lead of just 1 point. Campaigning in Pennsylvania, Carter was philosophical about his change of fortune.
There are widely conflicting polls depending on the origin of them. Some show us up and some show us down. I really prefer to have confidence in the one that shows us up.
Both candidates will be campaigning virtually round the clock until voting day on Tuesday. Peter Sharp, IRN, in Washington.
Meanwhile, independent television has cancelled 2 special programs on the American presidential election. ITN management decided to cancel the programs after members of the National Union of Journalists refused to work on them unless there was more consultation. The 2 programs, totaling 3.5 hours, should be going out on Wednesday. 2 people are in hospital after a fire at a block of flats in Highton. The fire started in an unoccupied maisonette in Greenway Close, but as firemen evacuated families, it spread next door. Mr. William Wright and Mrs. Ellen Knight were taken to hospital suffering from shock and the effects of smoke, but they're not seriously hurt. The Prime Minister has stepped into the campaigning for next week's 3 crucial by-elections. In a published message to the Labour candidate at Workington, Mr. Callaghan says that Britain's future prosperity depends on sticking to the social contract. Here's Lynn Edgson.
In his message, the Prime Minister makes no mention of the troubled state of the pound, but restates his belief in the social contract. He sees it as the only means of breaking out from what he describes as a decade of decline into a new era of prosperity. The basis of this sustained recovery, says Mr. Callaghan, is the partnership between the government and the people through the social contract. Mr. Callaghan stresses that the contract, together with strategy to revitalise industry, is the only means of reversing what he calls the downhill trend of recent years. We must create the goods, we must create the wealth, we must create the jobs, he says, adding that so long as these things are done, then there are good prospects for the country. Lynn Edgson, IRN.
A woman died after being hit by a car in Liverpool late last night. Mrs. Sarah McNally, aged 59, from Beatrice Street, died on her way to hospital. The accident happened at the junction of Great Homer Street and Wilbraham Street, and the police are appealing for witnesses. An inquest at Llandudno in North Wales has been told the tragic story of how a retired naval commander murdered 4 people and then killed himself because of his affection for his employer. Here's Tom Maddox.
The court heard how Commander Neil Rutherford, who worked at the Red Gables Hotel in Penmamar, tried to force his attentions on the owner, 59-year-old Linda Simcox, but his affection wasn't returned. He became depressed and jealous when he heard that an old American friend of Mrs. Simcox was coming to stay. The commander was also a heavy drinker, and while drunk he rowed with Mrs. Simcox about his work. She sacked him, and he said he put a bullet through her. Then 4 days later he returned and shot dead not only Mrs. Simcox, but her 24-year-old daughter, who was 5 months pregnant, her son-in-law, and the American friend. Rutherford then set the building alight and then turned the gun on himself. When police arrived, the building was in flames and the commander lay dead with Mrs. Simcox in his arms. Tom Maddox, Radio City News.
The Home Secretary, Merlin Rees, is visiting Manchester United today as part of an investigation into soccer hooliganism. He'll be meeting members of the supporters' club and discussing control arrangements with the police. Mr. Rees, a Leeds United supporter, will then watch the Old Trafford side play Ipswich. Still with sport, there are 9 first-class matches involving local clubs today, including Liverpool against Aston Villa and the Lancashire Cup final at Wigan. With all the details now, here's Elton Wellesby.
And what a game it is in prospect at Anfield. League leaders Liverpool against Aston Villa, just 1 point behind and snapping at their heels. Villa's goal-scoring feats this season, with Andy Gray in outstanding form, have made them top box office. And just to prove it, there'll be a near-capacity crowd at Anfield to watch the game, undisputedly dubbed Match of the Day. Well, after Everton's great show against Coventry on Tuesday, the best of the season according to manager Billy Bingham, they travel to London today, to Spurs, who are still piecing together their side after that 8-2 hammering at Derby 2 weeks ago. In Division 2, Blackpool could do their promotion hopes a boost by beating their close rivals Wolves at Bloomfield Road, where the tangerine and old gold shirts will be a constant reminder of former glories eagerly awaited again. In Division 3, Wrexham must shrug off the disappointment of losing to Aston Villa on Wednesday and retain the leadership of the division with a home win over Bury. Well, while Wrexham are at home, Preston, Tranmere and Chester all hit the road, and all will do well to come back with a result. Tranmere from Swindon, Chester from Reading and Preston from Gillingham. And in the 4th Division, Southport take their unbeaten run of 3 games to Exeter. Finally, Rugby League, and at Wigan this afternoon, the Lancashire Cup final between Widnes and Workington. A game we'll be covering in Sports Spectacular, along with all today's football involving local clubs. Elton Wellesby, Radio City Sport.
And finally, thousands of European shoppers are pouring into Britain this weekend. Monday is a public holiday in France, Belgium, Germany and Italy, and the visitors are expected to make it a long weekend of Christmas shopping. The British tourist authorities say they've had double the usual number of inquiries, and that the falling pound has made shopping the number one attraction. Now back to our number one attraction, Rob Jones. This has been Michael Green with Radio City News.
194